This German Shepherd had never known freedom. Locked in a tiny cage for 7 years, he'd lost all hope. His muscles had atrophied, his spirit broken by endless confinement. Nobody thought he could ever recover until one woman refused to give up on him. What she did next didn't just save his life. It revealed a hidden truth that shocked everyone who heard his story. This remarkable journey of resilience will make you believe in second chances. The rural property outside Carson City, Nevada looked unremarkable. From the road, a modest house set back from the highway, surrounded by several outbuildings and a chain-link fence. Nothing suggested the horrors concealed within. When the animal welfare team arrived that cold March morning, armed with a search warrant after months of investigation, they were prepared for the worst. Reports of a backyard breeding operation had circulated for years, but the reclusive owner had always managed to evade authorities. "Remember, document everything," instructed Diane Keaton, the senior investigator for the Regional Animal Protection Unit. At 54, with 20 years' experience investigating animal cruelty cases, Diane thought she'd seen it all. She was wrong. The smell hit them first. The unmistakable stench of long-term neglect, of waste and disease left unaddressed. Inside a dilapidated shed behind the main house, the team discovered dozens of wire cages stacked 3 high, each containing dogs in various states of neglect. Matted fur, untreated injuries, and signs of chronic malnutrition were immediately evident across breeds ranging from small terriers to large shepherds. At the far end of the shed, partially hidden behind empty food bags, stood a larger cage, unlike the others. While most contained multiple dogs crammed together, this one held a single occupant, a male German Shepherd whose size seemed impossibly large for the limited space. "Over here," called Sam, one of the younger officers, his voice tight with controlled anger. "This one's different." Diane approached cautiously. The German Shepherd didn't bark or growl like the others. He simply watched, his amber eyes tracking their movements with an unsettling intensity that spoke of intelligence undiminished by his circumstances. "He's huge," Sam whispered. "How long has he been in there?" The cage was barely large enough for the dog to stand up or turn around. His muscles had visibly atrophied from years of confinement, yet his frame suggested he would have been magnificent in proper condition. Most disturbing was the worn circular path visible on the concrete floor inside the cage, evidence of endless pacing in the only movement his prison allowed. According to documentation found in the house, the German Shepherd, identified only as Specimen A7, had been acquired as a puppy 7 years earlier. Records indicated he'd been trained initially, then confined permanently as a breeding stud once his desirable physical characteristics were confirmed. He had likely never spent a day outside that cage since reaching adulthood. "Can we get him out?" Sam asked, already reaching for the complex padlock securing the cage. Diane placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Carefully. After this long confined, he could be unstable. Get the catch pole ready just in case." As Sam worked on the lock, Diane knelt at eye level with the German Shepherd, speaking in the soft, steady voice she'd developed over decades of approaching traumatized animals. "Hey there, big guy. We're going to get you out of here, okay? You're safe now." The dog's gaze remained fixed on her, neither friendly nor aggressive, simply watchful, assessing. When the lock finally clicked open, everyone tensed, uncertain what an animal kept in such conditions might do when suddenly free. What happened next would stay with Diane forever. The German Shepherd didn't rush forward or retreat in fear. He simply stayed where he was, as if the concept of an open door had no meaning after 7 years of imprisonment. "He doesn't know he can leave," Diane realized aloud, her voice breaking slightly. "He doesn't even know what freedom is." The full scale of the operation became clear as the day progressed. 47 dogs were removed from the property, many requiring immediate veterinary attention. The owner, now in police custody, had been selling puppies online for years while keeping his breeding dogs in deplorable conditions. While most of the rescued animals were transported to the county's main shelter facility, Diane made a different decision for the German Shepherd. His case was severe enough to warrant specialized care, and something about those watchful eyes had affected her deeply. "I'm taking this one to Golden Pines," she informed her supervisor over the phone while following the transport vehicle. "They specialize in rehabilitation for severe cases, and they're not at capacity right now." Golden Pines Rehabilitation Center operated on 20 acres of former farmland and specialized in cases other shelters couldn't handle: animals with extreme physical or behavioral challenges resulting from abuse or neglect. Founded by Dr. Maria Vasquez, a veterinarian who had grown frustrated with euthanizing animals that could have been saved with proper resources, the facility combined state-of-the-art veterinary care with innovative rehabilitation approaches. Dr. Vasquez was waiting when they arrived, her experienced eyes taking in the German Shepherd's condition as he was carefully unloaded from the transport crate. 7 years in that cage? She confirmed, kneeling to examine him while he remained perfectly still, that same watchful gaze now fixed on her. "I'm surprised he can walk at all." "He barely can," Diane replied. "His muscle atrophy is severe, and he seems to have no concept of open spaces. When we opened the cage, he just stayed there until we had to physically guide him out." The initial examination revealed the expected physical issues: significant muscle wasting, pressure sores from lying on concrete, dental disease from poor nutrition, and several poorly healed old injuries. But Dr. Vasquez was more concerned about the psychological impact of such prolonged confinement. "Physically, we can help him recover with proper nutrition, exercise therapy, and medical treatment," she explained while drawing blood samples for analysis. "But the mental impact of spending his entire adult life in a space barely larger than his body, that's the real challenge." Most disturbing was the dog's complete lack of reaction to his changed circumstances. No excitement, no fear, no aggression, just that same watchful observation, as if waiting to understand the rules of this new environment before revealing anything of himself. "Does he have a name?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "Something better than Specimen A7? Diane shook her head. "He's officially evidence in an animal cruelty case now, listed as male GSD number 1 in our documentation." Dr. Vasquez frowned. "That won't do. He needs an identity beyond his victimhood." She studied the shepherd thoughtfully. "Atlas," she decided. "He's carried the weight of terrible circumstances on his shoulders for years. Now it's time for him to shrug it off." That night, Atlas was settled into a spacious indoor-outdoor kennel in the rehabilitation center's main building, the most comfortable accommodation he'd ever known, yet still a necessary controlled environment while they assessed his behavior. Security cameras monitored him throughout the night, recording as he spent hours meticulously exploring every inch of the space, mapping its boundaries with the precision of a prisoner measuring his cell. Most telling was what happened at dawn. As the first light filtered through the windows, Atlas returned to the exact center of the indoor portion of his kennel. There he began pacing in a perfect circle, identical in size to his former cage, a haunting recreation of his only known routine in a space now large enough to show its futility. Dr. Vasquez reviewed the footage with a heavy heart. "This won't be a quick fix," she told her staff during morning rounds. "We're not just rehabilitating his body. We need to help him discover who he is beyond his captivity." The question remained whether that was even possible after 7 years of imprisonment. Could Atlas learn to be a dog again? Or had his spirit been permanently caged, even as his body was finally free? The first weeks of Atlas's rehabilitation focused primarily on his physical needs. A specialized diet addressed his malnutrition, medication treated various health issues, and gentle physical therapy began rebuilding his wasted muscles. Throughout it all, he remained the same inscrutable presence, cooperative but detached, as if his body were present while his essence remained locked away, somewhere unreachable. He's unlike any case I've had before, Dr. Vasquez confided to Diane during one of her weekly visits to check on Atlas's progress. Most rescued dogs eventually show their personality: fear, aggression, or sometimes unexpected joy. Atlas shows nothing beyond that watchful observation. It's like he's still waiting for something. They stood observing as Layla, the center's most experienced rehabilitation specialist, worked with Atlas in the facility's indoor exercise area. A petite woman in her 30s with a quiet demeanor that belied her determination, Layla had been assigned as Atlas's primary handler. "Watch how he responds to commands," Dr. Vasquez pointed out. "Perfect execution, but no enthusiasm, no connection, like a machine performing its function." Indeed, Atlas performed each requested behavior flawlessly: sit, down, come, but with a mechanical precision devoid of the engagement typical of working dogs. His training had clearly been extensive before his confinement, but the emotional component that usually accompanied such intelligence was absent. After the session, Layla joined them, her expression troubled. "3 weeks, and I've made no emotional connection with him at all," she admitted. "He'll work for me, but he doesn't care about me. It's like he's permanently dissociated from everything around him." In most cases, Golden Pines followed a proven rehabilitation protocol developed over years of working with traumatized animals. Atlas, however, wasn't responding to their standard approaches. The breakthrough, when it finally came, happened because of a scheduled power outage rather than any planned intervention. With the building's climate control systems temporarily offline during maintenance, the rehabilitation center staff had opened windows to keep the interior comfortable. Atlas, napping in his kennel after his morning session, suddenly lifted his head, nose twitching at something carried on the spring breeze. Security footage later revealed what happened next. The German Shepherd rose and moved to the open window of his indoor-outdoor kennel, pressing his nose against the screen. Outside, barely visible from his angle, a young deer and her fawn had emerged from the wooded area that bordered the property. For the first time since his rescue, Atlas showed unmistakable interest in something beyond his immediate environment. His ears pricked forward, body tensing not with aggression but with the natural instinct of a predatory animal registering potential prey. For a fleeting moment, nature broke through his conditioning, awakening something primal and authentic. When Layla arrived for his afternoon session, she found Atlas still at the window, even though the deer had long since departed. Something had shifted in his demeanor, a subtle change most handlers would have missed, but Layla's experienced eye caught immediately. "He needs to be outside," she realized aloud. "Not just in the enclosed exercise yard, but really outside in nature." The rehabilitation protocol for severely traumatized dogs typically kept them in controlled environments until they showed reliable behavioral stability. Atlas, however, had exhibited no behavioral issues at all. His challenge was the absence of natural dog behaviors rather than problematic ones. "It's risky," Dr. Vasquez acknowledged when Layla proposed accelerating Atlas's environmental exposure. "He hasn't bonded with handlers, and his recall is procedural rather than emotional. If he bolts in an open area—" "I don't think he will," Layla countered. "He's not afraid, he's disconnected. Nature might be the bridge he needs to reconnect." The decision was made to attempt a carefully controlled nature walk the following day, a calculated risk that would either provide the breakthrough Atlas needed or confirm their worst fears about his psychological state. What happened on that walk would surprise everyone involved in his case and set in motion a rehabilitation journey unlike any Golden Pines had attempted before. Dawn painted the hills surrounding Golden Pines in soft golden light as Layla clipped a long training lead to Atlas's collar. Dr. Vasquez and 2 other staff members would accompany them on this first venture beyond the center's structured environments, prepared to assist if necessary. "We'll start with the meadow trail," Layla explained, her voice calm despite her underlying concern. "It's open enough that we can see clearly in all directions, but with enough natural elements to stimulate his senses." As they stepped outside the building's security door, Atlas moved with the same mechanical compliance he'd shown during all previous activities. The first 100 yards of their walk continued this pattern, the German Shepherd walking perfectly at Layla's side, responding to her cues but showing no particular interest in his surroundings. Then the trail curved away from the facility buildings and opened into a wildflower-dotted meadow bordered by pine forests. A morning breeze carried a complex tapestry of scents: wild animals, blooming plants, damp earth, elemental experiences Atlas had been denied his entire adult life. The change was subtle at first. His pace slowed slightly, nose lifting to sample the air more deliberately. His ears, typically held in a neutral position, began to pivot independently, tracking sounds beyond human hearing. "Look at his tail," Dr. Vasquez whispered to the others, hanging back to observe the interaction. For the first time since his rescue, Atlas's tail had risen from its perpetually low position and showed the faintest hint of movement. Not quite a wag, but no longer completely still. Layla, recognizing the significance of these small changes, made a decision. Squatting down beside Atlas, she unclipped the training lead, converting it to a 30-foot-long line that would give him freedom to explore while maintaining safety. "Go ahead," she encouraged softly. "It's okay to look around." For several heartbeats, Atlas remained motionless, as if the concept of independent movement was foreign after years of containment. Then hesitantly, he took a step away from Layla's side, then another, venturing in an expanding spiral pattern away from the humans, but never pulling the long line taut. What followed was both heartbreaking and hopeful. The German Shepherd moved through the meadow with increasing animation, investigating scents, studying tracks, listening to bird calls, experiencing the natural world perhaps for the first time in his memory. His movements became gradually less stiff, his body language more fluid as innate canine behaviors awakened from their long dormancy. "He's remembering how to be a dog," Layla murmured, careful not to interrupt his exploration. "Or maybe learning for the first time?" The real breakthrough came at the edge of a small pond hidden among cattails at the meadow's edge. Atlas approached the water cautiously, studying his own reflection with intense focus. After a moment's hesitation, he placed one paw in the shallows, then quickly withdrew it, startled by the sensation. Then he did something extraordinary. He looked back at Layla, making deliberate eye contact that asked a clear question. "Is this allowed?" It was the first voluntary communication he had initiated with any human since his rescue. Layla, fighting back tears, nodded encouragement. "It's okay, Atlas. The water is yours to explore." Permission granted, the German Shepherd waded carefully into the shallows, experiencing the novel sensation of water on his legs and belly. When a small frog leaped away from his approach, Atlas startled. Then, in a moment that the rehabilitation team would later mark as pivotal, he play-bowed toward the escaping amphibian, his body language showing genuine excitement. By the time they returned to the facility 2 hours later, Atlas was physically exhausted, but mentally transformed. The wall between his inner self and the outside world hadn't come down completely, but the first cracks had appeared. "This is just the beginning," Dr. Vasquez noted as they logged the session's observations. "He's awakening to a world he never knew existed. Now we need to show him that humans can be part of that world in a positive way." What no one realized yet was how this awakening would eventually lead Atlas to his true purpose, one that would transform not only his life, but the lives of others who, like him, had survived profound trauma. Over the next 2 months, Atlas's transformation accelerated through a carefully designed program combining outdoor experiences with gradually increased human interaction. The daily nature walks expanded to include different environments: forests, streams, open fields, each offering new sensory experiences that helped reawaken his suppressed instincts. Physically, his improvement was remarkable. Proper nutrition and exercise had added muscle to his once gaunt frame, and his coat had developed a healthy shine that hinted at the magnificent animal he was meant to be. But the most significant changes were behavioral, his mechanical responses giving way to genuine engagement with both his environment and his human handlers. Watch how he checks in with Layla now, Dr. Vasquez pointed out during one evaluation session. Where Atlas had once moved through the world as if alone, even when surrounded by people, he now maintained a consistent awareness of Layla's location, periodically making eye contact or returning to her side voluntarily. These developments, while encouraging, revealed another challenge. As Atlas emerged from his emotional shutdown, he began displaying signs of anxiety in certain situations, particularly around unknown men or in confined spaces that resembled his former prison. He's processing trauma now, Layla explained during a case review. Before, he was dissociated from his experiences. Now he's present enough to feel the emotional impact of what happened to him. This new phase required adjustments to his rehabilitation plan. In addition to physical and environmental enrichment, they introduced specific counter-conditioning techniques to help Atlas build positive associations with triggers that caused him distress. The most transformative element, however, came unexpectedly. During one of their now extended nature walks, they encountered a Golden Pines volunteer hiking with her 10-year-old daughter, Emma, who had Down syndrome. The girl's natural enthusiasm and lack of guarded body language caught Atlas's attention immediately. What happened next surprised everyone present. Atlas, who still maintained careful distance from most strangers, approached Emma with gentle curiosity, his body language completely relaxed. When the girl became excited and made sudden movements that would typically trigger wariness in the recovering shepherd, Atlas remained calm, seemingly understanding her differences intuitively. He's responding to her emotional authenticity, observed Dr. Vasquez, who had been accompanying Layla that day. Emma doesn't project the subtle tension or expectations that most adults do, even unconsciously. This chance encounter led to a structured introduction between Atlas and several children from a local special needs program who visited Golden Pines for animal therapy sessions. In each interaction, Atlas showed the same remarkable patience and gentleness he had demonstrated with Emma. It's like he recognizes something in them, Layla noted after several successful sessions, a certain vulnerability that resonates with his own experience. As these interactions continued, Atlas began demonstrating behaviors no one had anticipated. During one session, when a child became overwhelmed and began showing signs of distress, Atlas positioned himself between the child and others in the room, creating a physical barrier that helped the child regulate their emotions. In another instance, he alerted Layla before a child had a seizure, recognizing subtle physiological changes imperceptible to human observers. These behaviors emerged naturally, without any specialized training. Dr. Vasquez, who had studied service dog programs extensively during her career, recognized the significance of these observations. He's showing natural service dog aptitude, she explained to Diane during one of her now monthly visits. Not just any service work, but specific capabilities for supporting individuals with neurological differences or emotional regulation challenges. The irony wasn't lost on anyone familiar with Atlas's case. An animal kept prisoner for his physical attributes, valued only for breeding potential, was revealing an extraordinary capacity for emotional intelligence and supportive care, qualities his captors had neither recognized nor valued. As his rehabilitation progressed, a new possibility emerged, one that would require careful consideration and specialized training, but that might offer Atlas not just recovery, but purpose. Could this once broken German Shepherd, rescued from a life of imprisonment, become a healer for others? And was Layla, who had invested so much in his rehabilitation, prepared for what such a transition would mean for their growing bond? 6 months after his rescue, Atlas stood at a crossroads, both literally and figuratively. Beside him, Layla surveyed the busy children's hospital entrance, where they had been invited for an evaluation by the facility's animal-assisted therapy program. "This is different from our practice environments," she reminded him softly, adjusting his special therapy work vest. "Lots of new people, strange equipment, unfamiliar sounds, but I'll be with you the whole time. Atlas's transformation from the withdrawn, mechanically obedient dog they'd rescued was now complete. The German Shepherd, who had once paced in endless circles within his imaginary cage, now moved with confident purpose. His amber eyes, once watchful but empty, now communicated clear intelligence and emotional presence. The invitation had come after Dr. Vasquez shared Atlas's remarkable interactions with special needs children during a veterinary conference. The hospital's therapy dog program coordinator, intrigued by the possibility of working with an animal who showed natural aptitude for supporting children with neurological differences, had requested an evaluation session. Remember, this is just an assessment, Dr. Vasquez had cautioned Layla before they left Golden Pines that morning. No matter how well he performs, there's no commitment today. Atlas's well-being remains our priority. As they entered the hospital's pediatric wing, Layla felt Atlas's subtle shift in demeanor. His senses heightened, body language becoming more alert, but remaining calm. The working posture he had developed during their months of training. A passing gurney carrying medical equipment that would startle many dogs didn't even warrant a second glance from Atlas, who remained focused on Layla's cues. Jessica Morales, the program coordinator, greeted them with professional warmth. Thank you for coming. We've set up various scenarios to assess Atlas's responses in different therapeutic situations. The evaluation began in a quiet playroom where Atlas was introduced to children with various conditions, autism spectrum disorders, anxiety, trauma histories. In each interaction, he demonstrated the same intuitive understanding that had first caught their attention, adjusting his behavior based on each child's needs without specific instructions. With an overstimulated child, he created calming pressure by leaning gently against them. For a withdrawn patient, he offered engaging but non-threatening interaction. When monitoring equipment suddenly alarmed, Atlas remained steady while staff responded, his stability helping the children stay calm during the momentary disruption. I've worked with therapy dogs for 15 years, Jessica commented during a break, her expression thoughtful. Most good therapy dogs learn to tolerate different environments and respond to trained commands. What Atlas is doing goes beyond that. He's actively reading emotional and physiological cues, then responding independently with appropriate interventions. The final evaluation scenario involved 2 children with significant trauma histories, cases typically too challenging for standard therapy dogs due to unpredictable reactions. Atlas's response to these children proved most revealing of all. When one boy became triggered and verbally aggressive, Atlas neither retreated nor showed stress. Instead, he positioned himself in a way that created a sense of safety for both the child and others in the room, maintaining calm eye contact that seemed to communicate understanding without judgment. He knows, whispered the hospital psychologist observing the session. Somehow, he recognizes trauma responses because he's experienced them himself. By day's end, the evaluation results were clear. Atlas possessed natural abilities that couldn't be easily trained, an intuitive understanding of human emotional states combined with an extraordinary tolerance for medical environments and unpredictable behaviors. We'd like to offer Atlas a position in our specialized therapy program, Jessica informed Layla and Dr. Vasquez during their debrief session. He would work primarily with our neurological patients and trauma cases, children who often can't benefit from traditional therapy approaches, but might connect with Atlas. The offer represented everything they had hoped for during Atlas's rehabilitation, not just recovery, but purpose, a way for his difficult past to become a bridge to helping others. Yet it also presented a dilemma that Layla hadn't fully prepared herself to face. The position includes handler training for hospital staff, Jessica continued, but given Atlas's history and specialized needs, we'd prefer his primary handler remain consistent. Would you consider joining our program along with him, Layla? The question hung in the air between them. Layla, whose role at Golden Pines had always been temporary rehabilitation before animals moved to permanent placements, found herself at an unexpected junction in her own journey. Could she step away from her established career to follow Atlas into this new chapter? And what would it mean for both their futures if she chose to keep their paths intertwined? 1 year to the day after Atlas had been found imprisoned in that rusted cage, Diane Keaton walked through the bright corridors of the Children's Hospital, following the now familiar path to the pediatric oncology ward. As senior investigator for animal protection, she rarely saw the long-term outcomes of her rescue cases. Her role typically ended once legal proceedings concluded, but Atlas's case had been different from the start. She paused in the doorway of the ward's activity room, taking in the scene before making her presence known. In the center of a circle of children, Atlas lay patiently as a young girl with no hair, and a feeding tube carefully showed him pictures in a book. The German Shepherd's attention remained focused on the child despite the activity around them, his body providing steady support as she leaned against him. Nearby, Layla chatted quietly with parents and medical staff, occasionally glancing toward Atlas with the subtle monitoring of an experienced handler who trusted her partner but remained attentive to his needs. Atlas noticed Diane first, his keen senses detecting her familiar scent. His ears perked forward in recognition, though he maintained his position supporting the child beside him. Work before greetings, a principle he had embraced fully in his new role. "Our special visitors are here," Layla announced, spotting Diane and the woman beside her, Dr. Vasquez, carrying a small package wrapped in bright paper. The significance of their presence wasn't lost on the hospital staff. Today marked not only the anniversary of Atlas's rescue, but the formal certification of the hospital's specialized Healing Connections program, an innovative approach to animal-assisted therapy developed around Atlas's unique abilities, and now expanding to include other specially selected therapy animals. As the brief celebration commenced, complete with a dog-friendly cake for Atlas and regular cake for the humans, Diane found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here. The German Shepherd, who had once known nothing beyond the confines of a breeding cage, now moved confidently through the hospital as an essential member of the therapeutic team. His official title, Trauma Response Therapy Dog, recognized his specialized work with children facing not just medical challenges, but the emotional and psychological impact of serious illness, injury, or abuse. Research data collected during the program's pilot phase had shown remarkable results. Children working with Atlas showed measurable improvements in emotional regulation, reduced anxiety during medical procedures, and increased engagement with traditional therapies. Several previously nonverbal patients had begun communicating first with Atlas, then gradually with their human caregivers. "We're actually presenting the findings at the National Pediatric Psychology Conference next month," the hospital's research director explained to Diane. What began as a compassionate experiment has developed into a evidence-based therapeutic model that's drawing attention from hospitals across the country. Most remarkable to Diane was the transformation in Atlas himself. The watchful wariness that had characterized him during those early days had evolved into purposeful observation. He moved through the world now with confident belonging rather than detached compliance. Most telling was how he sought and maintained connections, not just with Layla, with whom he had developed a profound working partnership, but with the children who needed him. "He found his purpose," Dr. Vasquez observed quietly, joining Diane at the edge of the celebration. "And in doing so, he's helping redefine our understanding of trauma recovery, both for animals and humans." The cake was eventually finished, the celebration winding down as medical routines resumed. Atlas, ever attuned to the rhythm of the ward, was already moving toward a newly admitted patient, a boy who had arrived the previous day and had yet to speak to any of the staff, his body language communicating the same shuttered withdrawal that Atlas had once shown. Diane watched as the German Shepherd approached with careful respect for the child's space, offering presence without demand. One survivor recognizing another across the species barrier. "Does it ever seem strange to you," she asked Layla as they observed the interaction, "that his imprisonment, terrible as it was, gave him the capacity to understand trauma in a way most dogs never could?" Layla considered this thoughtfully. I don't think his suffering is what makes him special, she replied after a moment. It's his resilience, his ability to move beyond suffering and find connection again. That's what the kids respond to. He doesn't just understand their pain, he shows them a path forward. As if to illustrate her point, the withdrawn boy slowly extended his hand toward Atlas, making his first voluntary interaction since admission. The German Shepherd responded with gentle acknowledgement, his posture communicating patient acceptance of whatever the child could offer in that moment. It was a small gesture, nearly invisible to casual observation, but profound in its implications. One small crack in the protective wall trauma builds around its victims, one possible beginning of healing. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone familiar with Atlas's story. The dog who had once needed someone to believe in his potential to recover now, offering that same lifeline to others. The cage that had contained him for so many years hadn't defined him after all. It had merely delayed the discovery of his true capacity for connection and healing. As Diane prepared to leave, she paused for one final moment with Atlas, kneeling to his level as she had done on the day of his rescue. The German Shepherd met her gaze directly, and in his clear amber eyes she saw something that moved beyond recovery to wisdom, the hard-won understanding of one who had journeyed from darkness into light and now chose to guide others along the same path. "You did good, Atlas," she whispered, briefly touching his strong shoulder. "You did good." If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that even the deepest wounds can become wellsprings of healing, and that sometimes our greatest purpose is found through our most difficult journeys.